Welcome. We'll call this episode 12 of the Athletic Philosopher Podcast. I am your host, Professor Jordan Goldstein, ex-professor, not really a doctor, tribal professor, amateur philosopher. Labels aren't really my strong suit, as you can see. I'm pretty excited about this episode, and I want to use last week's episode as a little bit of a launch off and inspiration for this week's episode. If you didn't get a chance to listen, last week I was talking all about watching my daughter run the Terry Fox fundraiser at her school and what that evolution has looked like over the 3 years that she's been doing it, from junior kindergarten all the way up to first grade, and how I'm noticing leadership and courage and resiliency coming through her as she takes on more and more responsibility when it comes to understanding the best that sports can give us. And the Terry Fox Run, which is a charity run for cancer research, that's been going for almost 40 years now up in Canada and across the world, has really been beneficial in teaching her these valuable lessons, and I think tilting her towards a pretty promising career in distance running that she's learning through bringing out the best of herself. But this gives me an opportunity to talk about my other child and what he is learning in sports. And my little guy, Izzy, he's just 3. Turned 3 at the very beginning of September, and we have thrown him into the fire and the crucible of learning to ice skate at such a young age. And it's really been amazing to watch his progress over the first few sessions that we've put him on the ice. And I want to take today's episode to talk about lessons from Izzy, my little guy, that I've learned watching him in just 3 short practices, learning to ice skate, and more specifically, learning how to play ice hockey. So I've got 3 big takeaways here that I'm just going to talk about, and we're going to finish this guy up by, similarly to last week's episode, what are the ways in which we as adults who want to live athletic lives, who want to be athletes, who want to use sports as a moral vehicle to bring about our true potential and to live lives of deep meaning and purpose, what can the experiences of a 3-year-old falling down face first on the ice over and over and over again, what can that teach us, and how can we become better athletes and better people through Izzy's experience? Shout out to the little man. You are just so awesome. And this one's all for you and about you. Okay, so this one, I think I'll spell out the 3 lessons first, and then we'll go through each of them, and then we'll hit the takeaways. So the first lesson from watching my son, it's got to be fun. Fun, it's not an optional ingredient. It's a necessary requirement when it comes to learning, growing, and appreciating the deep value of sports. It's got to be fun. Second lesson, resiliency is power. Determination, grit, fortitude, discipline. These are all incredible things that my son is learning over and above how to stand up on skates and how to fall without being afraid when you are decked out head to toe in effectively warrior gear, which is his hockey equipment. We call it warrior gear to give him bravery and courage, so that resiliency is something he begins to learn. So lesson number 1, it has to be fun. Lesson number 2, resiliency is power. And both of these lead to lesson number 3, aim is the most important. What are we actually trying to teach little Izzy by putting him on ice skates? What are we trying to impress upon him by putting a hockey stick in his little gloves and telling him to go out there time and time again? if we weren't aiming at the right things, we wouldn't be learning lessons and we wouldn't be going back week after week, especially given the experiences that little man had in his first ice session. So the three big lessons: it has to be fun, resiliency is power, and aim is the most important. Let me set the stage here by describing the very first time Izzy stepped out on his single blade skates. Now, I think we did the little man a bit dirty. I think we did him a bit of a disservice with the way we introduced him to the world of organized sports. We are a sporty family. We like to be active, and we like to introduce our kids to the sports that we love as early as possible. And given that we live in Canada, winter sports hold I would say, a more prestigious place in terms of significance. So I want my kids to be able to skate. I don't really need them to have a hockey stick in their hands, but ice skating, especially outdoors on the frozen lakes, streams, and ponds that dot our landscape, is a very important skill. It's community bonding. Lots of times, social gatherings will happen at an ice rink or at an outdoor area where ice skating is available. And to have this skill in Canada, it's necessary to make friends and to, what I would suggest is, learn truly what it means to live in Canada, be a Canadian, and share made in Canada experiences. So my daughter, who's 6 now, we introduced her to ice skating when she was 18 months. My wife even put her on downhill skis when she was not yet 2 years old. I love skating. My wife loves skiing. This wasn't organized sport. They weren't taking lessons, but we just wanted to introduce them to the skills, to the experience before they developed a sense of fear, which happens a little bit later on. When you're young, you don't even know what you should be afraid of. And this is a great time to start introducing kids to maybe some dangerous sports that if you wait a little bit too long, they're going to develop apprehensions and they're going to develop timidity. So we followed the same playbook that we did with my daughter Lillian with our son Isaiah. We call him Izzy. Boss nickname, dude. So the little man, he's been on skates and he's been on downhill skis. But the skates that we used kind of set him up a little bit for a fall. Instead of a single blade that comes down from your boot, like you see for all ice skates, doesn't matter the type of ice skate, figure skate, speed skate, or hockey skate, it's all got one blade. But what we had been doing with our kids before their feet were big enough to fit into these skates, like they just don't make single blade skates for 18-month-old children. But what you can do is strap on a double blade over top of their boots. And this is how we got our kids used to and comfortable maneuvering on the ice. But unfortunately, as we were rudely reminded of the first time we put Izzy onto his single blade skates, it gives a little bit of a sense of false security. And my son, we signed him up for hockey. We've got a great volunteer-run local ice hockey association that does a learn to skate program for kids age 3 up to 7 or 8. And it's not based on age, it's based on skill level. There are not a lot of programs that will take a child as young as 3 and put them into organized sports. Now, this is there's a very good reason for this, and we'll get to that final lesson. Aim is most important when talking about what a 3-year-old can actually get from organized sport. But he's super excited to put on all the hockey equipment. We have this romantic, almost out of a fairy tale experience where we live. We live in a rural village, less than 1,500 people. The biggest building in our village is, of course, the hockey arena. And we live within about a 5 minutes walk of this hockey arena. and we've gone to public skates, we've gone to my daughter's ice hockey and figure skating lessons by putting on all of our gear in our living room, going outside, dropping the kid in their full equipment into a wagon or like a push stroller, and then we walk through the snow or the ice or the blizzard right into the hockey arena. It's this beautiful made in Canada fairy tale. So little man, super excited. We put on all of his warrior equipment to make sure it fits the day before. And then he is ready to go. He's very excited. We put him in all of his equipment. We drop him in the wagon. We walk over. And it's tough to know how each individual child is going to respond to being put into a difficult situation and whether being with them as the parent is the best option or not, right? Some kids, when mom or dad are on the ice with them, they are not able to pay attention to acquiring the skills. They just want the attention of mom or dad, and it becomes counterproductive to actually be out there and volunteering. Sometimes it's better to be in the stands. Sometimes it's better to be on the ice. I apologize, Izzy. We wanted to see how you would do without either one of us on the ice, and this turned out to be a pretty big mistake. We go, he's in his little skates, we drop him out onto the ice, and he is expecting to be able to stand up like he had before on the double wide blades, falls down, immediately is scared, doesn't want to fall, doesn't have mom or dad on the ice, and immediately it's a bad scene. He is screaming. He's screaming for Dada to come onto the ice. Luckily, since we live a 5-minute walk from the ice arena, I had my equipment. I had my skates and my stick and my glove ready to go at the front door. Should have brought it to the arena. That was a mistake. Ran back home, grabbed my gear, ran back to the arena, put it on. Within 5 minutes, I was out on the ice with the little guy, but the damage was already done. He spent the entire 40 minutes screaming, I want to come off. I want to come off. I want to come off. I want to go to mom. I want to go to mom. I want to go to mom. No, thank you. No, thank you. No, thank you. When I would try to get him to stand up. And this leads to lesson 1. It has to be fun, right? When you are learning, and especially when a child is learning, they do it through play. They do it through imaginative exploration. They do it through fun. This is one of the reasons I love this particular volunteer-led skating program. When you've got kids who don't know how to skate and you put them in full hockey gear, head to toe, it's fun to fall. It's fun to crash around on the ice because you realize, hey, even if I slip, I'm not going to get hurt. And if you're a guy, even if you're as young as 3, it's kind of fun to have all those pads on and to crash yourself into the ice or in the boards or maybe into one of your friends on the ice and not get hurt. But when all you want to do is get off the ice, when all you want to do is go to the safety and the security that you feel either in mom's arms or just having your 2 feet on the ground and not on the ice, there's not a chance for learning. So number 1, the big lesson, it has to be fun. Whether it's fitness, whether it's learning a new hobby, whether it's starting out with a creative act, even something like starting a side hustle. If there's not an element of fun, you're not going to stick with it. You're not going to put up with the trials and the tribulations, with the falling down, if you don't see yourself springing back up and wanting to try again because you desire to gain the skills. My son, no fun on day 1. We weren't even trying to really do anything other than getting the kids to get up on their knees and learn how to stand up from being on the ice. He didn't even want to do that. He couldn't even comprehend something like that. And what was amazing about being on the ice with him that first session, he could do what was required. He could get up. He had the skills. He just had no will. He had no determination because fun was the last thing that he was having. But fast forward to this past Saturday, no tears. All smiles going on the ice. He knows now that when he goes on the ice, he's going to get a ride or two on the stick. He's going to get smiles. He's going to get high fives from the coaches. And we made one important change. Dad doesn't go on the ice now. Mom goes on the ice. Mom is his safety blanket. So if mom's on the ice with him, he's got nowhere to go. If he wants a hug, guess what? You got to stand up and get that hug, buddy. So now he is able to have more fun. He's able to understand that by staying out on the ice, I can have smiles, I can have good times, and I can start to do the things that the other kids are doing and that the coaches are trying to teach me. Basically, getting up from lying on the ice and being able to stand on your two skates with a stick in your hand. This leads to lesson number 2. Resiliency is power. If you looked at that very first session, a kid just over 3 screaming, I want to get off, I want to get off. One thing that we just can't do as parents is take the kid off. He's not hurt. He's not being traumatized. He is simply trying to use emotion as leverage in order to get what he wants. And what he wants is to quit. What he wants is to stop doing the hard thing. And I don't blame him. He's 3. But it was pretty apparent that without fun, we have to start teaching the lad about fortitude and grit and not quitting. Ultimately, organized sports for kids aged 3, 4, and 5, it's not about skill acquisition. It's not about learning the sport. It's not even about understanding technique or even the rules of the game. It's about learning to have fun. It's about trying your best. It's about not quitting when things get difficult. And it's about learning to listen to a coach's instruction and support teammates. Resiliency ultimately is the biggest thing any of these kids is going to learn by playing sports this early on. So little man goes from screaming the whole time to maybe crying for a quarter to now smiling the second he gets out on the ice and working pretty diligently for a 3-year-old at improving his skills. And ultimately, why then do we keep him when he's not having a good time, when it's clear that it's more difficult for us simply to get him to calm down than it is for the coaches to try to impart any type of a skill onto him? Goes to that third lesson. Aim is the most important. The right expectations make the right experience. If the idea was little Izzy's got to become a hockey player in 3 months, that first on-ice session, we wouldn't have been congratulating him. We wouldn't have said how proud we were. We wouldn't have given him incredible adulation and commendation. We would have focused on the fact that all he did was cried. Izzy, you didn't do a very good job standing up. Izzy, you didn't do a great job listening to the coaches. Izzy, do you even want to be a hockey player? Think about how absurd those questions are when dealing with a 3-year-old. Instead, this is what we were saying to him. Izzy, we're so proud of you for not giving up. Izzy, we're so proud of you that you kept going even though you wanted to quit. Izzy, this is what it feels like to do a hard thing. Izzy, we are amazed at how resilient you are. We had the right expectations on what we want him to learn. This then creates the right environment for him to start learning the right lessons. And once he starts to learn those correct lessons, the fun of the activity opens up because now there's no pressure in terms of having to do this or having to do that. All we want him to do is try hard, not quit, have fun, listen to the coaches, support your teammates. With the right aim comes the right expectations, comes the right experience, comes the right lessons, and ultimately frees us up to enjoy the activity. And in 3 short weeks, you would never even know what that first session looked like for my little guy. You would never imagine that he spent the entire 45 minutes screaming to get off, because now all he wants to do is get back on. When we told him the second time that he was going back to hockey, he didn't want it. I don't want to go back to hockey. Now, I get to go back to hockey? Yay. That's all we're looking for here. We don't need him to be focusing on anything other than having fun and learning not to quit. And these are such powerful lessons that we need to take stock of them seriously as adults wanting to utilize sports for their deepest potential and ultimately have them manifest into great value in our lives. So let's go with these 3 lessons applied to us. Number 1, aim is the most important. If you go back and listen to the philosophy discussion that myself and Patrick Flynn had on episode 10, we talk a lot about the importance of aim, and in particular how Aristotle, the famous classical Greek philosopher, directs us to consider aim as one of the most important variables to get when it comes to leading a meaningful and purposeful life, right? When we are thinking about fitness in our own lives, what are we aiming it at? Are we aiming at just at physical health, maintenance, and longevity? That's great, but is that sufficient in order to keep us consistent? Well, if we look at the statistics, no. Everybody knows that exercise is a vital component to maintaining your physical health as you age, yet over 70% of adults in the United States, and similar numbers here in Canada, where I live, are overweight and obese. So everybody knows they need to be moving, everybody knows they need to be exercising, but nobody's doing it. So it's not even a good strategy for consistency, let alone meaning and purpose. If all you do is go to the gym and move your body in rote ways, you're not really challenging yourself, pursuing any kind of an achievement, challenging yourself to acquire new skills or to do something that you haven't done before, you're going to get bored. It's not going to be fun, and you're going to lose interest real quick. So aim is the most important. When thinking about fitness, when thinking about sports, we need to aim deeper than just the body. We have to connect to the heart, and ultimately we've got to enjoy these activities as a form of play, which gets us back to lesson number 1. It has to be fun. Play is learning, friends. Children learn through play, and we as adults similarly learn, just like the children, through play, through exploration, imagination, and creativity. In play world, The consequences of making a mistake are not dire. We simply try again. In the serious world of adults, making a mistake is disastrous for my ego. It is ruinous for my reputation. I can't bear feeling like a novice, feeling like a beginner, feeling like I'm failing because I'm supposed to have it all together as an adult. So we stop playing, we stop learning, and we stop challenging ourselves. So we're not growing, now we're stagnating, and eventually we are going to be deteriorating. So fitness, for it to be aimed correctly, has got to aim for the heart, and that means play, which means it's got to be fun, My little man, when he was not having fun on the ice, you could not convince him that going back to the ice arena was good. Now that he's having fun, he wants to go to the ice arena. He doesn't care so much about falling. He kind of flops up on his knees. He looks up. He'll lie back down on the ice. He'll get up. He'll bang his stick. He's learning and he's enjoying himself. We need to take that example seriously. If we want to progress, if we want to utilize sport as a means to develop our characters, well, then we have to be placing ourselves in a challenging position where we're going to have to come up against adversity or resistance so that we can break through, bring the best of our characters to triumph over that adversity. We have to be having fun. That's key to learning, and that's key to wanting to struggle and wanting to keep going instead of quitting, which leads us to that final lesson, or lesson 2, resiliency is power. As adults, when we think about physical activity and we connect it to the body, like I mentioned earlier, we're talking about physical health. We're talking about longevity. We're talking about being able to enjoy our lives as we age, as opposed to the world shutting off and limiting our opportunities for expression and experience because we have not maintained our bodies and our bodies are falling apart. So we need all of the elements required to keep us consistent in moving our bodies in vigorous and intense ways that allows us to live beautiful lives even as those around us have the beautiful life shut off to them because they have not maintained their bodies. And this is why we have upwards of 70% of adults, at least in North America, who are overweight and obese and are hurtling towards the final decades of their lives being marred by chronic disease, diabetes, increased pain, increased inflammation, limited opportunities to move in meaningful and expressive ways, almost no option to be adventurous, to explore the world, to use creativity and imagination through our bodies to find deeper meaning and purpose. It's not because a lot of these people haven't tried. They have, but they just quit. They start up a new exercise program, and 3 weeks later, they're off it. They start up a new fad diet. 3 weeks later, they're off it. People want to try, they just quit too easily. They have no resiliency. Why? Because there's no fun. Why? Because their aim is totally off. So as we look to first establish consistency with our physical habits, but secondly, and maybe most importantly, to utilize physical activity as a form of deep expression that creates purpose and meaning in our lives, well, we need to take these 3 lessons from my little guy seriously. We need to aim properly. We have to have fun because otherwise we are just going to quit. And what does quitting say about us? That when things get hard, we're not able to measure up? that we're not willing to subject our characters to the crucible and the pressures of growth, that we're not able to transcend ourselves because settling and mediocrity is easier than sticking with it, I would never limit my son's potential by telling him any of those things. And adults look themselves in the mirror and repeat those, I'm just going to call them lies, often enough that they don't move, they don't dream, and they don't aspire. If you have a child and you put them in sports, think about what you hope they learn. Now, recognize you need the same lessons as an adult in order to keep developing, keep growing, keep becoming a better version of yourself. Seems simple, and maybe the path is clear, but that doesn't mean it's easy to walk, which is why the sage wisdom of a child's experience is not something trite, is not something superficial, and it's not something that most people would call childish. It's a reminder that adults need the wisdom of children in order to live in a world that is wonderful. The adult world's too serious, and when we strip it away of its playful tendencies, we're left with just the objective results, and that is not making people happy, it's not making people fit, it's not giving people purpose to drive through adversity and challenge. So the ultimate takeaway from watching my son in just 3 ice hockey practices as he is 3 years old, just because you're an adult, don't think you've grown out of the lessons that work for children. That might be your biggest problem right now as an adult, and why you're struggling, why you're drifting, why you're aimless, why your health is deteriorating, and why you can't seem to find the motivation to go after it with conviction and determination. Think of my little Izzy, 3 years old, standing up on his single blades time and time again until, and I will update you guys, I promise, in about 2 to 3 months, he's going to be skating. These volunteers, they've got a 100% success rate with kids, 3 to 8, getting them to skate within the first couple months. And why? Because their aim is correct. They make it fun as they can, and they recognize that the true power in putting these kids out there for one of their very first organized sporting experiences is just to get them to keep showing up again with smiles on their faces. If you can do that, the skills will follow and the habits will become ingrained. And that's wisdom for all of us, not just for the little ones. See you guys next week. Maybe I'll have even more lessons from the kids. Maybe we'll have an interview. Who knows? I really appreciate everybody being here and going on this exploratory adventure with me on the podcast. This is my way of aiming correctly, making it fun, and simply not quitting an endeavor that is tricky to be consistent with. So I'm also utilizing all of these lessons right now with the production of this podcast, and I appreciate each and every one of you for listening. We'll see you again in the next episode.